the very end of chapter 5, I just didn't, as usual, my claim to fame is, leaving the last 3 verses of a chapter at the end of a class. And so we'll come back to the end of chapter 5. We'll look at the last little bit on the end of chapter 5, and then we will move on into chapter 6. We'll look at those review questions for chapter 5 before we do that here in just a moment. And then we'll move into, like I said, the discussion of chapter 6. Let me see if I can get the penguins off the screen and get chapter 5 on the screen. Before we begin, though, if you would, let's share a word of prayer together. Our Father in heaven, thank you for the day that you've given us and the beautiful life that you provide for us. We know that you care for us and share with us all the many blessings. And we're so appreciative of everything that you give to us, our daily sustenance, the provisions that we are given on a daily basis. We know all good gifts come from you, but we're especially thankful for Jesus. Thank you for the wisdom that's given through his testimony. Thank you for your word that guides us and leads us. And just strengthen us in our study tonight. Allow us to appreciate more and more your testimony. And we pray all these things through thy Son's name. Amen. So, chapter 5, very end, we didn't quite finish all of this discussion. And just wanted to give us a chance. There, I did it again. Those aren't even penguins, are they? I thought they were. Oh, I completely closed that. One of those days. All right, chapter 5. He's had a pretty interesting discussion, and he's not done talking about riches, right? He's going to come back to that topic in chapter 6 and the challenges that brings. But it's interesting because he did change, in a sense, his conversation a little bit at the end of chapter 5. Because he's been pretty cynical, right? Up until the end, he's pretty cynical about what he's witnessed and seen and the behaviors of men and the things that happen to them and the kinds of oppressions and difficulties and challenges that he has experienced. But at the end of the text, he simply says, "Behold that which I have seen, it is good and comely for one to eat and to drink, and to enjoy the good of all his labor that he taketh under the sun all the days of his life, which God giveth him, for it is his portion." The contrast, if you will, between the guy that just pursues, right? He's got to have the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. He's never content, never satisfied, always trying to build bigger and better all the time. That fella doesn't sleep, he doesn't rest, he has no peace. That's been the cynical kind of challenged view of what the author had seen. But now he said, here's the contrast to that. Just let a man enjoy the gifts of God, right? Just let a man enjoy and appreciate the labor that he's worked at and recognize that it all comes from whom? That God giveth him his portion. That really is the difference between everything taught in this book, by the way, is human pursuit versus appreciating what God provides. That's basically the whole argument of the book. Is here all these things that human beings try to appreciate and learn and know, and we try to get all this wisdom and gain all this understanding of the world in which we live without much thought or inclination towards what God has shared with us and the wisdom that he's provided. And so this book really, from start to finish, just kind of contrasts those two things. And it almost inevitably every time that he comes back and makes a statement about how it is that man has made mistakes in pursuing all these things, he'll come back and remind them that if you just appreciate what God has given, you'll be in a far better condition. Every man also, he says, verse 19, to whom God hath given riches and wealth, and hath given him power to eat thereof, and to take his portion, and to rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God. Not his success, not his personal accomplishments, not everything he's gained by his own personal endeavors, but he's benefited because it all comes as a gift from God. For he shall not much remember the days of his life, because God answereth him in the joy of his heart. Interesting, right? He'll have a better perspective on the life that he's living, and he's not going to look back with regret He's not like those who kept pursuing riches and the things of this world would. He's not going to have a heart that's overwhelmed by those kinds of things, because he's just simply been contented with the portion and provision and the gifts that had come from God. And he's always acknowledging every day that every ounce of his labor and effort and purpose that he has, it's all because of what God has done.
It's a little ironic. We look at the first example, talking about someone being discontented by trying to be content of his own labor by his own hands. But then here we see someone who ends up being contented, or being content with what he's done because he knows it's because of God.
Right. And God's the equalizer in this whole conversation and throughout this process. That's what. And if it's always about us, we're going to be disappointed, because we're not going to have the success we want, and we're not going to have the accomplishments that we thought we would, and it's all about those personal kinds of endeavors. But remembering that simply God has provided is the answer we should seek.
Right. When I read this, I think about the New Testament, about the rich farmer. Tear down these barns and build bigger ones.
Yeah.
And I think it's 7 times in that passage, it's either I or my, or me, or not giving God any credit for what he had.
Right.
And I think the writer here kind of clears that up.
And I think we see that. I think we see that throughout various texts where people didn't give God any credit for what he'd actually done. And those people were the ones that seemed to find themselves in challenge. And the rich man who kept building bigger barns is an example of that, how it was always personal about what he had accomplished, and never once gave a thought that his soul would be required of him in that very evening. And so you see that in various texts and examples. Okay, real quick then, just run those questions real quick just as a review. Again, one of these days I'll learn to finish a chapter in a timely manner, but probably not anytime soon, so don't bank on that. But let's run these questions just to review chapter 5, then let's springboard over into chapter 6. Really, the theme has not changed a lot when we do that. What instructions are given about approaching God in worship? Okay, be prudent, right? Be careful. Yeah, be ready to listen and hear what God is offering, not so much be the one speaking all the time, and the warnings about that. Why is it better not to vow than to vow and not fulfill it? Yeah, God doesn't take any pleasure in those who make promises and vows and have no intention and make no effort to keep it. And so he warns us. The consequence isn't just about the vow breaking in relationship to some personal challenge it might present earthly-wise, but God will recompense those things. And so we've got to take vows seriously. How does the preacher describe the corruption of power and bureaucracy? What do you talk about in relationship to that?
Well, there's always one higher than the one in power.
Yeah. So be careful, right? Because in bureaucracy, there's always a next step up. And ultimately, there's a great authority which is God, right? And he saw all kinds of oppression and difficulties and injustices, and he's talked about that on various occasions. What is the danger of loving money? Yeah, it never satisfied. It'll just be a continual pursuit that'll never end. How does wealth fail to bring lasting satisfaction? Why can't it bring lasting satisfaction? Think about it that way. Okay, you can't take it with you? Okay, right? It can be deceitful in that sense. Okay, you can be constantly overwhelmed with worrying about losing it, right? The pursuit seems like it's the best thing to do, but it never really actually brings any satisfaction because we're always just lack of contentment in that process. What is the gift of God mentioned in this chapter? It's an interesting way to ask that, by the way. You think about it. Okay, the heritage in which we receive, the benefit that came from the work that we do, right? It's not about our accomplishments, it's about the gift of God and his provisions for us as a result of that labor. It's about perspective, and we'll see that even going further into chapter 6. And then finally, how might this chapter shape our attitude toward promises, money, and contentment? That's just a summary question, by the way. Okay, rely on God for everything. That's where real contentment will come. When you make a promise, keep it. And money is a what? It could be an evil, or it can be the blessing from God, right? That's really the summation of this chapter 5, is when you make a vow, keep it. Money is a gift from God, not a right or something you've earned and received on your own. And contentment comes when we recognize God in that process. Okay, just wanted to run those review questions with you. Go to chapter 6. Let's start look at this. So, same thought process, right? There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, and it is common among men. He's still making observations about the things he's witnessed and seen, right? And this one's interesting, the way he does this. And for lack of a better word or phrase, in our modern mindset, he's a bit insensitive in the manner in which he illustrates. And you'll see what I mean here in a minute, because he makes an interesting contrast between the foolish rich man and an untimely birth, a stillborn birth, right? That's what he's talking about. And that's the contrast that he makes. And that's why I say I'm going to be careful a little bit here, because I don't want to be overly insensitive, because he uses a very sensitive kind of topic matter to discuss this contrast. And so I suppose maybe in that time period in which it was written, the sensitivity to that would have been less, for lack of a better way to phrase that. But anyway, just be aware that it's an interesting way to make this contrast. So he says he's seen a man to whom God hath given riches, wealth, and honor. We've talked a little bit about, is this Solomon, is this not Solomon? We've pointed to some things that seem to indicate that it is Solomon writing this. We've pointed at a handful of things that you go, maybe doesn't necessarily fit him, maybe he's talking about somebody else, but that fits him, right? Remember when God says, what do you want, right? God asks, what do you want? You're going to lead my people, what do you want? And he said, I want wisdom. And God said, okay, I'll give you that, but I'm also going to give you, these things he just said here too. Riches, wealth, honor. Those are the things God says I'm going to give you as well, on top of the wisdom. So he could be referring, if it's Solomon, right, he could be referring to himself here in this moment. A man to whom God hath given riches, wealth, and honor. If it's not him directly, it's him by description, because that's Solomon. That's how he would be described. So that he wanteth nothing for his soul. That's an interesting word, the word soul. Because when we think of soul, what do you think of? Yeah, but think of the spiritual side of man. I don't think that's really what he's saying here. Because that's the wealth and the prosperity of earthly things don't prosper the spiritual side of man. The challenge that the writer is going to have with this individual he's describing is that he's actually has a soul that's empty. That's going to be the conversation. He's got a spirit that doesn't enjoy anything. And so his conversation isn't about his so that he wanted nothing for his soul, as in his spirit was just fine, his inner man was fine. It's his person that didn't lack anything. He didn't want for anything. He had the riches, the wealth, the honor, all the things that men think they want. he had. Bill mentioned a text earlier. If you remember, the rich man who said, I've got bigger crops than I ever imagined. I'll tear down these barns and I'll build bigger ones. And he said, I'm trying to make sure I see if I can quote it correctly. But he said to himself, soul, take thine ease, right? But what was it about him that was eating, drinking, and being merry? It wasn't his inward man, it was his outward. So I'm just trying to illustrate to you that sometimes you see the word soul, don't just jump to inward man. It may not refer sometimes to inward man. It actually may just mean the man, the person. So that he didn't lack anything for himself personally. Anything that he desired he had. And yet God giveth him not power to eat thereof. But a stranger eateth it. This is vanity, and it is an evil disease. I know a man, and maybe the writer's just, which he's done before in the text, he's just drawn what we would, in debate form, we'd call that a straw man. You kind of create this character that fits what you've generally seen. So you kind of comprise this figure of a person who fits these various descriptions. But at any rate, here's a guy, he doesn't lack for anything, but he doesn't get to enjoy any of it. He never enjoys any of it. I think that's the imagery you and I got to get into our heads in chapter 6. Because I think that's what he's talking about. He's not talking about a man who never ate, right? He's not talking about a man who's never consumed food. He's talking about a man who never enjoyed anything. He had anything and everything his heart desired. His soul didn't lack for anything. His person didn't lack anything. And yet he didn't enjoy any of it. And the saddest part is it all ended up in the hands of whom? Somebody, not just somebody else, but how was it described? A stranger. You accumulated all this stuff, didn't enjoy any of it while you lived, and now it's just being devoured by strangers. You didn't even have anybody to leave it to. Okay, somebody says, well, maybe that's why he couldn't enjoy it, because here he had all this great benefit, and he didn't lack for anything, but at the end of the day, he didn't have anybody to leave it to or help with it, no heritage by which that he could benefit somebody to come along. Oh, okay, we can maybe understand why that guy would struggle with enjoying the blessings in the back of his mind, knowing they were just going to end up in the hands of the stranger. So the writer says, okay, then let's add this qualifier. If a man beget 100 children, first guy left it to strangers, different description of same situation, but let's add a different qualifier in, the writer says. This time we're going to add in the qualifier that here's a man who had 100 children. Now, does that seem far-fetched, by the way? Yeah. If it's Solomon, and by the way, biblically, Ahab had, anybody know? Ahab had 70. Rehoboam had 88. And so they're close. They're close, right? And all I'm trying to illustrate is when he says this, to them, you don't go, oh, this is fairy tale, right? Why should I even listen to this? Because look at this odd example that he's drawing. Well, no, there were a handful of guys that kind of fit the description that he's talking about. So if a man beget 100 children, and he lived many years, so that the days of his years be many, and his soul be not filled with good, and also that he have no burial, I say that an untimely birth," here it is, "I say an untimely birth is better than he." Now again, it's kind of an odd, someone might argue insensitive way to make a contrast, particularly because he's not done making that contrast, by the way. But he's just trying to argue, a guy could have 100 children, and even though he had the prosperity and benefit of a large family, it's still possible that his soul still not enjoy anything. And those children didn't even care enough about him to what? To have a proper funeral for him when he died. He's just gone. And the writer says, I say that an untimely birth, a child born that didn't get a chance to experience anything, is better off than that guy. He's better off than that guy is, who lived with a large heritage, but didn't care about him, never enjoyed anything. Riches and wealth can't change that. He can have the abundance beyond measure, but it doesn't change the sadness of his circumstance.
He's better off more than one way, too.
Who is?
The one that the untimely
Yeah.
birth is better off more than one way.
Yeah, well, because he's not done. So keep reading. "For he cometh in with vanity, and departeth in darkness, and his name shall be covered with darkness." If I'm not wrong, he's still talking about the untimely. That's what he's still talking, because there's no life to be described. That's what he's saying. They enter with vanity, departeth in darkness, and his name shall be covered with darkness. Moreover, he hath what? Not seen the sun, nor known anything. This hath more rest than the other. Yeah. That one born in an untimely manner wasn't given an opportunity to experience life. Born in what is described as a darkened state. Now, don't overreach here. This isn't an attempt to describe what happens in that scenario. Okay? And what I mean by that is we can overreach as far as drawing conclusions about what happens when a child is stillborn. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. I don't think the writer's trying to give us some kind of theological, eternal understanding of what happens in that moment. He's using it as a contrast. He's trying to get us to see, he's not talking about that side of the issue. He's trying to get us to see, here's this description that he has. They didn't see light. They didn't see the sun. There's no record of, there's no great heritage record that comes after their name. There's none of that. And they're still better. They're still better than a man who had everything but had 100 kids, didn't enjoy them, they didn't enjoy him, had everything the world had to offer but never enjoyed any of it, and when he died, he just died. That's
experience the living went through the stillborn.
Yeah.
Never had to experience. So in a lot of ways, the life of the stillborn, as short as it is, was better than the other.
Yeah, and I want to make sure we understand it, what the writer's trying to say. It's better than that, okay? Because I don't think the writer nor I don't want to be misunderstood, that we're saying somehow that's better. No, it's not. It's not a good thing. It's not a better thing in the sense of the situation itself. It's the contrast to how it is better than this circumstance that this guy has placed himself in. Okay? So first qualifier, if I got all the riches in the world, this is going to be great. But he says, I've seen this sadness where guys have had the greatest riches in the world. They don't enjoy any of it, and a stranger gets it when they're gone. Oh, but if he had only had a great heritage to share it with. The writer says, I've seen guys have 100 kids. None of them cared enough about him to even bury him when he died. He still had wealth, but never enjoyed any of it. He's worse off than this other circumstance. Oh, but maybe he could have lots of years to live. Maybe that would be the answer. Yea, though he live 1,000 years twice, yet hath he seen no good. Do not all go to one place. I didn't want to hesitate too much here because I wanted you got to see it all together to kind of understand it. If you parse it out, we'll make wrong conclusions. He's showing us threefold way of how he describes the same circumstance. A man could have great wealth. If he doesn't enjoy it, if he doesn't appreciate it's from God, if he doesn't have anybody to share it with, he didn't have anything. He could have a lot of kids, big heritage, but they don't care about it. The wealth and riches still don't satisfy him. He's still no better off. He could live 2,000 years. He could have longevity of life. Isn't that what everybody wants? Wealth, riches, and to live forever, right? He could have that too. But that's not going to guarantee that he's going to find any joy, contentment, peace, anything. That doesn't guarantee any of that. And ultimately, don't they all end the same way? Which he's talked about before in the book. We all eventually what? Die. And this guy died rich, and either no one to share it with and a stranger got it, or it ended up in the hands of children who didn't even care about him enough to bury him, or he lived 2,000 years but was miserable every single day of those 2,000 years because he never appreciated God in the equation. That's who's being described here. That's the picture that the writer is trying to get you and I to see. Okay, I'll pause.
When he talks about the verse with this, basically the stillborn child, it's almost like his second way of repeating the fact of it was better to be, not born at all than to be an old, foolish king, because you would never have seen all of this evil.
Right, and that principle is the same. It is the same that he used in an earlier illustration. All the labor of man is for his mouth, and yet the appetite is not filled. For what hath the wise more than the fool, and what hath the poor that knoweth to walk before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the desire. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. Okay, so this imaginary concept of how I'm going to find joy, and it eludes him the whole time. When contentment really is about accepting what's right in front of you, right? Think about that. Better is the sight of the eyes. What, right? Than the wandering of the desire. Contentment with what's right in front of me. Than to feel like we're always having to expand beyond. what's right in front of us. I know that there have been lots of times, I suppose, that I could think about moments where I wasn't enjoying the moment because my mind was where? Yeah, somewhere else, right? My mindset was about other things, and I was looking past the blessing that was right in front of me. That's what happens in the pursuit of riches, the writer says. You become so consumed with the next thing, you can't appreciate the thing that's right in front of you. And we don't find a pathway to enjoy anything then, the writer says. And so be careful. There are things that the foolish and the poor actually understand better than this rich example that he's using. Verse 10, that which hath been is named already, and it is known that it is man, neither may he contend with him that is mightier than he. Seeing there be many things that increase vanity, what is man the better? For who knoweth what is good for man in this life, all the days of his vain life, which he spendeth as a shadow? For who can tell a man what shall be after him under the sun? All right, so let's think about this last segment of this chapter. And you thought I could never do it. Give me a 12-verse chapter, I can make it happen. But so think about this with me for a minute. That which hath been is named already, and it is known that it is made. What's that sound like, by the way? What phrase has he used repeatedly? Yeah, there's nothing new under the sun. That's similar, right? It's similar language to that. That there's nothing new under the sun. That which hath been is named already, and it is known. Neither may he contend with him that is mightier than he. Who do you think he's talking about? Who's he contending with? Yeah, maybe that's. I think you're maybe right. I think what he's saying is the real struggle here isn't just a man's personal pursuits. It isn't just about what he's trying to gain for his own personal pleasure. The problem really is he's in contention with God. God's the one who's the real provider. But man gets in his head that his work and his effort and his labors and all the things that he's doing is really what's providing the benefit. And so his contention is actually with the Creator. And if you contend with the Creator, you lose. You lose. Because he's always mightier. He's always mightier. So quit thinking about how you're going to create joy in your life, and start thinking about how God is providing joy to your life, right? I think that's what he's communicating. We think we can figure it out. Isn't that what the writer's been writing about? I decided I would pursue everything to figure out what makes man happy. I drank. I got riches. I had women. I had all these things that I could pursue, the writer says. Anything and everything my heart desired, I received it tenfold. And I was still miserable. None of it brought happiness. In fact, it all brought vexation of heart and spirit, he said. It didn't bring any of the benefits of joy that I thought it would. When man tries to create it, he's often disappointed. When you open your eyes to how God is providing it, it strengthens the inward man and brings real joy and benefit. Is that easy, by the way? I would argue it's not always easy to just kind of stop pursuing and be open to receiving that which God is extending. And the reason why it's more difficult sometimes is what often God is providing to bring that joy and contentment is not what I want. Or what I expted. And so all of a sudden I think, well, I knew joy or happiness would come with these things. That's what I decided for myself. And that way, but God's offering something else. Well, I guess I'm going to have to get this on my own. And that's the challenge that we often create.
I mean, it's talked about in the New Testament, we're human, we're carnal, and one of the things that we've done since the beginning is fought against God. And when it comes to, God giving us stuff, maybe we didn't even know we needed, or sometimes we think we need something, so we want it, but God's like, no, you don't need this, you need this. So He gives us something we don't want. We want to fight back, and we want to try to push for what we want on our own. We can't, if God doesn't give it to us, or if it's not handed down to us on a silver platter, then, we try to get it on our own. And so with that, as talked about earlier, it's all worthless, because you finally say you get what you want. You finally get that car you've been hoping for. What's going to happen to it after you die? You have a wife, it'll be given to her, but after that, then what? You don't know what's going to happen. You're not going to be able to say where it went. You're not going to be able to. Who knows? It might go to a junkyard. You don't know.
So, and again, I think we just have to appreciate real joy and contentment then comes from the hands of God. And anytime we're trying to pursue it from whatever angle, on our own personal merits or benefit, we're going to create more challenge than benefit. And then add the last thought. For who knoweth what is good for man in this life? If we just stop for a second right there and just add the question mark at the end of that, what's the answer? God. Yeah, right? For who knoweth what is good for man in this life? The answer to that is God. All the days of his vain life, which he spendeth as a shadow, for who can tell a man what shall be after him under the sun? There is but one answer to that, and the answer is God. The problem is, man thinks he can answer that on his own. That's when we get into trouble. Man convinces himself that he can answer this on his own. And all the days of his vain life, all these things that he spends in shadow, who can tell a man what shall be after him under the sun? Only God can. Yep, go ahead, Bob.
Verse 9 really kind of capsulizes the whole thought here, that whole thought process. It's what man sees, what God has given him, what he has to be happy with.
Yeah.
And not what his heart desires, but is what he doesn't have.
Right.
He spends his time desiring things that he don't have. He's not happy.
Right. And I think it's important for us to go back, right, and maybe in a weird way, and my typical not getting a whole chapter done actually was a benefit in some ways tonight, because the last segment, that last couple of verses of chapter 5, set the stage for this. Because he said, enjoy what you have. Enjoy the results of your labor, so long as you recognize that it's the gift of God, so long as you recognize how you received it, where it came from. Because, why? I've seen a rich man who has more than his soul could ever imagine. and he doesn't enjoy a bit of it. And he dies and a stranger gets it. I've seen a man who had more than he could ever imagine. He had 100 kids. None of them cared enough to bury him. All he still had was riches, miserable the whole time, no benefit. I saw a man, he could live 2,000 years of his life, and he still wouldn't find the joy and happiness he thought he could receive because he's so consumed with his own desires and pushing forward to what he can receive. That guy is worse off than one who never saw the sun or never saw the light of day. That's the thing that he's trying to make sure we appreciate. And then he concludes the same way. God's the only way. Real joy, real contentment, real happiness, how we can appreciate what it is we have, only when God is the reason, and that we recognize that as it relates to that. All right, we'll come back and review this real quick Sunday, Lord willing, and then we'll jump into chapter 7.